Hello and welcome to another episode of Listen to What the Man Said, which is an offshoot podcast of my highly successful YouTube channel, Bored at the Right Time. Today is Paul McCartney's 80th birthday, and while I was collecting my thoughts about the man, I thought to myself, what can I say about this man that has not been said before? He is the most prolific songwriter of the 20th century and coming into the 21st century as well. Even the young kids know who he is. And I mean, after all, he probably is one of the top 5 most famous people on this planet. And I dare not compare him to Jesus because we know what happened the last time someone did that.
Here's a song to shake thy bum too.
We have come tonight to rock you. And you know, I'm getting a feeling like we're going to have a good time here tonight. Hey, what about that?
So today I thought I would talk about Paul McCartney and what he means to me. No matter what other people may say, I'm his number one fan. Guilty. I've been a fan for 30 years. I can't believe it. Since I was 8 years old. I actually can't remember a time when Paul McCartney was not in my life. That's how long I've been a fan. I can actually remember time and place based on what Paul McCartney album was out at the time. For example, the day after I started my current job is the day that Chaos and Creation in the Backyard came out. And I remember going to Best Buy, which for you young kids used to sell CDs. And I got that CD. And of course, I got the deluxe edition, which I always get is the deluxe edition. Why get the regular when you can get the deluxe? It came with a DVD and some extra songs. It was good. So I remember driving home while listening to that in the car. Some cars used to have CD players. I also remember driving to Best Buy on the night that Back in the US came out, which was 2 days before Thanksgiving in 2002. And almost getting ran off the road by an 18-wheeler while singing at the top of my lungs to Jet, playing through the car stereo. I also remember being 18 years old and being dropped off on the corner of Madison Square Garden, my first grown-up concert that I had gone to. It was April 26, 2002, and I remember tickets were very expensive, so I figured I would buy one really good ticket instead of 2 mediocre tickets for someone to come with me. 2002 was the first time I saw him on the Driving USA tour. And I remember calling my home answering machine to leave a message. And I just held up the phone, my Nokia, wasn't a flip phone, wasn't a smartphone, it was just a cell phone. I remember calling and just holding it up. And while he played, We Can Work It Out. Even though the song before is my favorite song, I should have done it to that song. I don't know why I waited, but anyway, I did that. And that message was on the machine for probably 3 years. I wouldn't let anyone delete it. Paul has meant a lot to me in my life. In fact, I remember the first time he kind of came into my consciousness. I was watching VH1 and I kept seeing this commercial for a concert special called Paul McCartney Up Close. So I asked my mother, I said, who's Paul McCartney? And she said he was a singer. I said, oh, was he any good? And she said, yeah, I think you'd like him. So she taped that concert for me. And the rest is, shall we say, history. He was plugging Off the Ground at the time. So Off the Ground was the first Paul McCartney record I bought when it actually came out, first of many, and I got it on cassette first. And to this day, it's one of my top favorite Paul McCartney albums. I think it's just that sense memory of this was the first record I had. And let's be honest, those songs aren't the greatest. Biker Like an Icon, Looking for Changes, Mistress and Maid. Those were like throwaway songs from Flowers in the Dirt, but still, they meant a lot to me at the time and still do, actually. I own just about every Paul McCartney release that has ever graced this planet, whether it be on cassette, CD, record album. I'm even trying to get my hands on a mini disc version of Off the Ground as we speak. So I even own two of the super deluxe versions of Flaming Pie that came out. I mean, we're talking the huge ones. It's probably, you know, 4 feet by 5 feet. It's pretty big. Why get one when you can have two, right? I just adore the archive collection because I feel like it gives me a chance to re-listen to some of the albums that I may not be so aware of. And I enjoy listening to them remastered and reading about them with the uh, very detailed liner notes. But I also enjoy the official releases of the demos or different cuts that have been out on bootleg for years, but you finally get good copies of them and they sound really good. So you kind of hear the work in progress that Beautiful Night is. You know, you kind of hear from 1985 ish, 86 ish when he wrote it to 10 years later when he finally released it on the Flaming Pie album. It really is a great concept, and I have hope that more will be coming soon. I mean, I'm not going to hold my breath for an off the ground deluxe remaster, but we can always hope, right? I would love to hear your favorite Paul McCartney song or album, if you could put it in the comments below. I just love reading the comments and kind of seeing, what my fans enjoy. And, I love talking all things Macca. I actually had a close call with Paul once. I was at a Paul Simon concert at the Beacon Theater. I had bought very expensive resale tickets. About halfway through the show, there was a big hubbub going on in the middle of the orchestra, probably 2 or 3 rows in front of me. It seemed like it almost looked like a fight was breaking out, like everyone was kind of motioning, and I wasn't quite sure what was going on. I think even Paul Simon got a little thrown off because he kept, seeing all this action. So anyway, after the intermission, I realized that Paul McCartney was there, 2 rows in front of me. You'd think like I'd have, like Paul McCartney radar or something. I feel like a lot of people know him as Beatle Paul, but his solo career doesn't really get the credit it deserves. And I feel like if you look at it in context of Paul McCartney as a solo artist, it's just as prolific as, say, a Billy Joel or an Elton John, if not more. I feel like he has such baggage from the Beatles, and I don't mean that negatively, but he has such, Beatle baggage that people just can't let go that he was in the Beatles. When I first became a Paul McCartney fan, I remember going to the library and reading books back, then you had to use a card catalog and all that kind of stuff. There was no internet 30 years ago. But I was shocked to read that Paul McCartney was in another band besides Wings. He was in this band called the Beatles. The longer I live on this planet and the more I read about Paul or learn about Paul, I'm just still blown away with what he has accomplished in the first 30 years of his life, let alone the last 50 years as a solo artist. Say what you will about him, but his work ethic and always urging the Beatles to let's go into the studio, boys, is the reason that we have probably the last 3 or 4 albums. He's a workaholic, and he was always pushing the boys to, push out another record. And Paul McCartney is always ahead of the curve, ahead of his time. Let's take a look at McCartney 2. He clearly doesn't live in the past, and he's always reinventing himself. I mean, in the 90s, he had gray hair, and now closer to his 90s, he has blonde hair. He's a blonde again. See what I did there? The last album he released is McCartney 3, and that album alone shows his staying power. So, I just wanted to wish Paul a happy birthday and kind of show off what he's meant to me in my life. I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone that's a fan kind of knows everything he's done. So I figured I would try to do something else and not just, throw facts at you about this, that, and the other thing that he did in 1987 or something like that, but kind of talk about what he's meant to me in my life. because, any self-respecting Paul McCartney fan already knows what he was doing in 1987. So as always, I hope you've enjoyed this video. And if you enjoy content like this, I hope you'd consider subscribing if you're not already subscribed, and to smash that like button. It really does help with the algorithm and everything like that. And it lets YouTube know that you enjoy this content. And like Paul McCartney says at the end of every concert,
See you next time.